Let me ask you about thinking in general. This is something maybe that you and Jim Keller think a lot about, is thinking how to think. How do you think through an idea?
Well, first of all, I think, okay, that's a really good question. We've tried to work that out with this essay app that my son and I have developed, because if you're going to write, the first question is, well, what should I write about?
What's the name of the app?
Essay.app. And, well, the first question is, well, what bugs you? What's bugging you? This is such a cool thing. It's like, where is my destiny? Well, what bothers you? Well, that's where your destiny is. Your destiny is to be found in what bothers you. Why do those things bother you? There's a lot of things you could be bothered by. Like a million things, man. But some things grip you. They bug you. And they might make you resentful and bitter because they bug you so much. Like, they're your things, man. They've got you. So then I look for a question that I would like the answer to, that I don't, and I would really like the answer to it. So I don't assume I already have the answer, because I would actually really like to have the answer. So if I could get a better answer, great. And so that's the first thing. And that's like a prayer. It's like, okay, here's a mystery. I would like to delve into it further. Well, so that's humility. It's like, here's a mystery, which means I don't know. I would like to delve into it further, which means I don't know enough already. And then comes the revelation. It's like, well, what's a revelation? Well, if you ask yourself a question, it's a real question. Do you get an answer or not? And the answer is, well, yeah, thoughts start to appear in your head. So
From somewhere.
that's right, from somewhere.
Where do they come from? Do you have a sense?
Depends on what you're aiming at.
Depends on the question. But
No, it does to some degree. It depends on your intent. So imagine that your intent is to make things better. Then maybe they come from the place that's designed to make things better. Maybe your intent is to make things worse. Then they come from hell. And you think, not really. It's like, you're so sure about that, are you?
Is your intent conscious? Like, are you able to introspect
It's
with the
conscious and habitual, right? Because as you practice something consciously, it becomes habitual. But it's conscious. It's like when I sit down before I do a lecture, I think, okay, what's the goal here? To do the best job I can. To what end? Well, people are coming here not for political issues. They're coming here because they're trying to make their lives better. Okay, so what are we doing? We're conducting a joint investigation into the nature of that which makes life better. Okay, what's my role? To do as good a job about that as possible. What state of mind do I have to be in? Am I annoyed about the theater? Or am I clued in and thrilled that 4,000 people have showed up at substantial expense and trouble to come and listen to me talk? And if I'm not in that state of mind, I think, well, maybe I need something to eat, or maybe I need to talk to someone, because that ingratitude is no place to start. It's like I should be thrilled to be there, obviously. And so that orientation has to be there. And then is it conscious? All this is conscious. What am I serving? The highest good I can conceptualize. What is that? I have some sense, but I don't know it in the final analysis, which is why the investigation is being conducted. Who's doing it? Me, whoever I'm communing with, and the audience. And so I try to get myself, and I chase everybody away for that. It's like I have to do that by myself.
Are you writing stuff down?
Yes, at that point, I just make point notes, and it's usually about maybe 30 notes. But then on stage, I never refer to them, and I often don't even use the structure that I laid out.
Kind of an interesting thing. From where do powerful phrases come from? Do you try to encapsulate an idea into a sentence or two?
Well, when I talk, and I've practiced this consciously since 1985, I try to feel and see if the words are stepping stones or foundation stones, right? It's like, is this solid? Is this word solid? Is this phrase solid? Is this sentence solid? Like, it's a real sense of fundamental foundation under each word. And I suppose people ask me if I pray, and I would say, I pray before every word. Well, when you're asking questions, like you're very clear-headed and present in your ability to ask questions and inquire. So how do you do that?
So first of all, I'm worried that my mind easily gets trapped when I step on a word and I know it's unstable. You kind of realize that you don't really know the definitions of many words you use, and that can be debilitating. So I kind of try to be more carefree about the words I use, because otherwise you get trapped.
You don't want to be obsessional.
Like literally, my mind halfway through the sentence will think, well, what does the word sentence mean?
Right. Well, neurologically.
And then everything else just explodes.
Yeah.
Your big picture idea explodes and you lost yourself in the minutia.
Well, neurologically, there's a production center and an editing center. And those can be separately affected by strokes. And so often when people are writing or talking, they try to activate both at the same time. And that's so people will try to write an essay and get every sentence right in the first draft. That's a big mistake. And so then you might say, well, how can you be careful with your words but carefree? And the answer is orient yourself properly, right? While in the conversation we're having, you have an orientation structure. You want to be prepared. You want to be attentive. Then you want to have an interesting conversation. And you want to have the kind of interesting conversation that other people want to listen to, that will be good for them in some manner. Okay, so that's a pretty good frame. And then you kind of scour your heart and you think, is that really what you want? Are you after fame? Are you after notoriety? Are you after money? I'm not saying any of those things are necessarily bad, but they're not optimal, especially if you're not willing to admit them, right? And so they can contaminate you. So you want to be decontaminated. So you have the right trip, let's say. And so you have to put yourself, that's a meditative practice, you have to put yourself in the right receptive position with the right goal in mind. Then you can, and I think you can get better and better at this, then you can trust what's going to happen. So for example, before I came here, I presume you have a reason for doing the podcast with me. What's the reason?
We wanted to talk for a long time, so the reason has evolved. One of the reasons is I've listened to you for quite a long time, so you've become a one-way friend, and I have many one-way friends. Some of my best friends don't even know I exist. So I'm a big fan of podcasts and audiobooks. Actually, most of my friends are dead.
Yeah, right.
The writers.
The definition of a reader. With a lot of great dead friends.
So I wanted to meet this one-way friend, I suppose, and have a conversation. And then there's this kind of puzzle that I've been longing to solve. The same reason I went to Ukraine, of asking this question of myself: who am I? And what was this part of the world? What is this thing that happened in the 20th century? That I lost so much of my family there, and I feel so much of my family is defined by that place. Now, that place includes the Soviet Union, it includes Russia and Ukraine, it includes Nazi Germany, it includes these big, powerful leaders and huge millions of people that were lost in the beauty, the power of the dream, but were also the torture that's was forced onto them through different governmental institutions. And you are somebody that seemed from some angle to also be drawn to try to understand what was that. And not in some sort of historical sense, but in a deeply psychological human sense. What is that? Will it repeat again? In what way is it repeating again?
And how can we stop it?
And how can we stop it? And so
that's the crucial issue.
I felt I wanted to, from very different backgrounds, pull at the thread of that curiosity. I'm an engineer, you're a psychologist, both lost in that curiosity, and both wear suits and a talk with various levels of eloquence about sort of the shadows that history cast on us. And so that was one. And also the psychology. I wanted to be a psychiatrist for a long time. I was fascinated by the human mind until I discovered artificial intelligence, the fact that I could program and make a robot move. And until I discovered that magic, I thought I wanted to understand the human mind by being a psychiatrist, by talking to people, through talk therapy, psychotherapy.
So now you got the best of both worlds, because you get to talk to people and you get to build robots.
Yeah, I mean, but the dream ultimately is the robot. That I felt like by building the thing, you start to try to understand it. That's right. One way. I mean, we all have different skills and proclivities. So like my particular one is has to do with I learn by building. Yeah. I think through a thing by building it. And programming is a wonderful thing because it allows you to like build a little toy example. So in the same way you can do a little thought experiment, programming allows you to create a thought experiment in action. It can move, it can live, it can and then you can ask questions of it. So all of those, because of my interest in Freud and Jung, you're also in different ways have delved deeply into humanity, the human psyche, through the perspective of those psychologists. So for all those reasons, I thought our paths should cross.
Yeah, so that's quite a frame for a discussion, right? Yeah. You had all sorts of reasons, and then you think, well, are you just letting the conversation go where it will? It's like, well, not exactly. You spent all this time. It's not like this came about by accident, this conversation. You spent all this time framing it. And so all of that provides the implicit substructure for the play in the conversation. And if you have that implicit, here's another way, this is very much worth knowing, is if you get the implicit structure of perception right, everything becomes a game. And not only that, a game you want to play. And maybe in the final analysis, a game you'd want to play forever. So, that's obviously a distant beckoning ideal. But we know games need rules, or there's no play.
Is there advice you can give, now that we know the frame, to give to me, Lex, about how to do this podcast better, how to think about this world, how to be a good engineer, how to be a good human being, from what you know about me?
Take your preoccupation with suffering seriously. It's a serious business. Right? And that's part of that, to circle back to the beginning, let's say, that's that willingness to gaze into the abyss, which is obviously what you were doing when you went to Ukraine. It's like, it's gazing into the abyss that makes you better. The thing is, and this is maybe where Nietzsche's idea is not as differentiated as it became. Sometimes your gaze can be forcefully directed towards the abyss, and then you're traumatized. If it's involuntary and accidental, it can kill you. The more it's voluntary, the more transformative it is. And that's part of that idea about facing death and hell. It's like, can you tolerate death and hell? And the answer is, this terrible answer is, yes, to the degree that you're willing to do it voluntarily. And then you might ask, well, why should I have to subject myself to death and hell? I'm innocent. And then the answer to that is, even the innocent must be voluntarily sacrificed to the highest good.
That's such an interesting distinction. Voluntary suffering.
Voluntary, yeah. Well, that's why the central Christian doctrine is, pick up your cross and follow me. And I'm speaking not in religious terms saying that. I'm just speaking as a psychologist. It's like one of the things we've learned in the last 100 years is voluntary exposure to that which freezes and terrifies you in measured proportions is curative.